is a practice. This is a practice test for Chapter 5. Making a handful of graphs, I'd like you to use your calculator table function, but if you don't, you can do the tables manually. Problem 1 has two parts, gives me two different graphs, wants me to find the vertex, make a table, find the axis of symmetry, and sketch a graph. I'll do this table by hand, the other table I'll use on my calculator differently. Parentheses problem, so I change the sign, put that number in the middle of my x column, go smaller and bigger. So my table should have 4 in the middle, and not even using function notation here, which is nice. For each x now I want to get a y. First x, I'm going to do 2 minus 4 squared minus 3. So 2, parentheses 2 minus 4 squared minus 3. My first y is going to be 1. And now I'm going to do y equals 3 minus 4 squared minus 3. This is horribly tedious. I get negative 2. And then y equals 4 minus 4 squared minus 3. Much rather use a table to do this, and I prefer you to do that. And then y equals 5 minus 4 squared minus 3. It's going to be negative 2. This is good. My y's are repeating. If my y's repeat, I've got a good set of values in my x column. And then lastly, 6 minus 4 squared minus 3, which apparently I can't do right, which is 1. So that's my table of values. I like 5 points in my tables. Now my x's need to get out to 6. And my y's just need to go down to negative 3 and up to 1. And then the best I can, I'm going to plot the points. I label the vertex, and that's the only point that I label. So 2, 1, just a dot. 3, negative 2, just a dot. 4, negative 3 is the vertex, so I'm going to actually label that point. 5, negative 2, just a dot. 6 and 1, just a dot. Draw my parabola with little arrows at the end. That's my table. Sketched a graph. The vertex is the point 4, negative 3. I'm going to draw in my axis of symmetry because it asks for it. And the axis of symmetry is an equation that only has an x. And it's always x equal to the number it goes through on the x-axis. In this case, it went through 4. I'd rather you not do your tables like this, but if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. I'll do part B, and I'm going to use the table feature on my calculator. For part B, change the sign of the number in the parentheses. That's negative 5. Smaller than negative 5 is negative 6 and negative 7. Bigger than negative 5 is negative 4 and negative 3. So my x-axis needs to get out to negative 7. I'm going to get my y's lazily. So mode 7, negative 2 parentheses alpha x plus 5 parentheses squared plus 4. Start at negative 7, end at negative 3, step 1. The first y is negative 4. Second y is positive 2. Third y is positive 4. Fourth y is positive 2. Last y is negative 4. If your y's don't duplicate top and bottom, you don't have a good table. So my y-axis needs to go between the 4s. Sometimes the y's get ridiculous and I have to fudge on my y-axis a little bit, and that could be coming up here in a second. So negative 7, negative 4, just make a dot, it's not the vertex. Negative 6, positive 2, just make a dot. negative 5, positive 4. I'm going to write that in because it's the vertex. I always have a vertex in the middle of my x column. And then negative 4, positive 2, negative 3, negative 4. And that's maybe not the best graph, but mine never are. So I've made a table, sketched a graph, labeled the vertex, need the axis of symmetry. I'm just going to draw it in. The axis of symmetry, I usually just write AOS for it. It's a vertical line that goes through the vertex. In this case, the vertex goes through negative 5 on the x-axis, so it's going to be x equal to negative 5. Everything we need to do for those. The next two problems want me to use the formula to get the starting part of my table, make a table of values, and sketch a graph and find the vertex, but doesn't ask for anything more. There's no maximums or mins on the test. So the formula for the middle of my x column in my table is going to be negative b over 2a. And in this problem, the a is 3 and the b is negative 18. So it's going to be negative from the formula, and then b is negative 18 over 2a, which is 2 times 3. That gives me 18 over 6, which is 3. So in the middle of my x column, I need 3 smaller and bigger. I'll do this table by hand. The next table I'll do on my calculator. So the first y is going to be 3 times 1 squared minus 18 times 1 plus 22. Mode 1 or mode 2, it doesn't matter. 3 times 1 squared minus 18 times 1 plus 22. That gives me 7. And then 3 times 2 squared minus 18 times 2 plus 22. So back up and just change each of the 1's to a 2. It's going to give me negative 2. And then 3 times 3 squared minus 18 times 3 plus 22. A horribly painful way to do this, but it's fine if you don't have the technology that can do the table. It gives me negative 5. I could gamble and just repeat the numbers in my table now. If I have a good table, my numbers are guaranteed to repeat. You get that negative 2 again. And I'm just going to gamble that that's 7. It doesn't even look like a 7. But 3 times 5 squared minus 18 times 5 plus 22. I do get that 7. So I've made my table the old-fashioned way. And now I'm going to, I've plot my graph. I need to go up through 5 on the x-axis. And down to negative 5 and up to 7 on the y-axis by just looking at the numbers in the y column. Now I'm just going to plot the points and I'm going to label the vertex. It doesn't ask for an axis of symmetry. There's no maximums or mins on the test. So first point 1, 7, I'm not going to label it. It's not the vertex. 2, negative 2, not the vertex, not label it. 3, negative 5, label it, call it the vertex. 4, negative 2, 5, and 7, the best I can, plot those points. Draw something that's more of a U than a V. Try to actually go through the points, put little arrows at the end. Good enough for that one. And part B is the same, but I'm going to do the better table. So my table value, or the vertex value, I do the negative b over 2a. And in this problem, a is negative 1. It's an implied negative 1 there. B is 10. Negative b is going to be negative 10. 2a is 2 times negative 1. This is going to be negative 10 over negative 2, which is 5. So 5 in the middle of my x column, smaller in bigger. Don't want to do all my tables by hand, so mode 7, negative by the fraction, alpha, right parentheses for x squared, plus 10, alpha, right parentheses for x, minus 20, have the function in OK, start at 3, end at 7. I always do step 1. Something's not right. I don't know what I did wrong. Mode 7, negative alpha x squared plus 10 alpha x minus 20 equals start at 3, end at 7, step 1. There we go. Next to 3 I should get 1. Next to 4 I should get 4. Next to 5 I should get 5. Next to 6 I should get 4. Next to 7 I should get 1. Beautiful that the y's repeat. If the y's don't repeat, then I don't have probably good values in my x column. So I just need my y's to go up to 5. Plot all the points. Label the vertex. First point 3, 1, not the vertex. I'm just going to dot it. 4, 4, not the vertex, just dot it. 5, 5 is the vertex. Dot and label it. Call it the vertex. And then 6 and 4, 7 and 1. The negative in front of the x squared makes this thing upside down. Little arrows at the end to signify the graph keeps going. And that seems suitable for that. Done graphing. Mode in 2 is a good place to be for the rest of this section. Problem 3 wants me to use the quadratic formula, which is not given on the test. You have to know the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You have to know that you need 3 terms and it has to be set equal to 0. It won't work for anything but squares. I'm going to set part A equal to 0 because the quadratic formula, if it's not set equal to 0, you don't get the right signs on the numbers and you'll get the wrong answer. So in part A, my A is going to be 6, my B is going to be 5, my C is going to be negative 3. Since the B is positive, it doesn't need to be in a parentheses. I'm going to go x equals negative and then 5 for B plus or minus b squared, which is 5 squared. If b is negative, it needs a parentheses. If it's positive, it doesn't. Minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which is 2 times 6. Under the radical is 5 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 3. Under the radical, I get 97. So this is going to give me x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 97. The denominator comes out to be 12. I'm going to try to reduce that square root of 97. You should use your calculator to reduce on this test. It doesn't reduce. When there's a square root left in the answer, I need a plus or minus in my answer. There's not an I, so I shouldn't break this into 2 fractions, and that's not a reducible fraction because the denominator doesn't go into anything in the numerator. That's all I can do for part A. Part B, it's set equal to 0, so I'm ready for the quadratic formula. A is 3, B is 5, C is negative 2. I'm going to go x equals negative b, again it's negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is going to be 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 2, over 2a, which is 2 times 3. Under the radical is the 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. Under the radical is 49, so this is going to be negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 49. The denominator comes out to be 6, and the square root of 49 is 7, so the radical is going to drop. When the radical drops, I shouldn't have a plus or minus in my answer. So this comes out to negative 5 plus or minus 7 over 6. I need to separate this into negative 5 plus 7 over 6 and negative 5 minus 7 over 6. The first one, the numbers have opposite signs. I subtract them and get positive 2 over 6, which reduces to 1/3. The second one, the signs are the same, so I add them and keep them negative and get negative 12 over 6, which is negative 2. For part B, my answer should be x equal to 1/3 and x equal to negative 2. Part C, quadratic formula again. My A is going to be the 1. The B is negative 4, so it's going to need to go in a parentheses. The C is 8. I'm going to go x equals negative, and then parentheses negative 4 for the B, plus or minus the square root of parentheses negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8, all over 2a, which is 2 times 1. Under the radical, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. Under the radical, I'm going to get negative 16. So x is going to equal to, double negative here is going to be positive 4, plus or minus the square root of negative 16 over 2. And if I'm in mode 2, square root of negative 16 is just 4i. When you get an I, you need to make separate fractions. So this gives me x equals 4 plus or minus 4i over 2. I should leave the plus or minus because I have the I, but I should make separate fractions. The separate fractions are going to be 4 over 2 plus or minus 4i over 2. Both of them, the 4's cancel, or the 2's cancel. 4 over 2 is just 2. 4i over 2 is just 2i. The 4 over 2 cancels to 2. And that's going to be the best answer for part C. If you have a square root or an I left, you need plus or minuses in your answer. If there's no square root and no I, you shouldn't have a plus or minus in your answer. 4 wants me to solve by square root plus or minusing square root. That's what the square root property is. I don't know why I have a Q there, but I'll deal with it. So to do 4, it says solve by the square root property. I'm going to square root the side with the parentheses, plus or minus the square root side with the constant. The left-hand side gives me q plus 2. The square root of 25 is just 5. There's no square root, so I shouldn't have a plus or minus in my answer. I need to solve for q by minusing 2 from both sides. Now I'm going to make up the two problems implied by the plus or minus, which is negative 2 plus 5 and negative 2 minus 5. The first numbers have opposite signs, so I subtract them. The second grouping, they have the same sign, so I add them. And my answer to 4a would be 3 and negative 7. Saving time and not checking when I don't have to. There's only one problem on the test that I absolutely have to check. It's a problem that starts with a square root and I square to get rid of the square root. Problem 4b wants me to solve using the square root property. So again, square root plus or minus square root. Left hand side, it square roots to be t minus 6. The right hand side, I'll reduce the square root of 20. If you have technology, use the technology to 2 square root of 5. Because there's a square root, my best answer has a plus or minus sign. I should leave the plus or minus sign in my answer. I'm going to finish this up by adding 6 to both sides. The left-hand side, the 6's cancel. On the right-hand side, I just write the 6 preceding the plus or minus sign. You shouldn't get an 8. You can't add. If I do 6 plus 2 square root of 5, those aren't combinable. That doesn't equal 8 square root of 5. That's the reason I leave my answer with a plus or minus, because both versions of this, 6 plus 2 square root of 5 and 6 minus 2 square root of 5, they don't equal 8 square root of 5 and 4 square root of 5. They're not addable. 20 minutes probably should break the video and do a part 2.